welcome everyone to our Next Stop College series that we put on here with Cal Lutheran's admission office. My name is Floan Cerna. I serve as the Dean of Undergraduate Admission and Outreach, and today we're going to talk about the cost and financial aid. So I will let you know, so I have a few slides to share with everyone. We're going to be breaking down a few things here, but I will also have time towards the end for questions and answers, which we'll be taking through the chat feature, or there's a little Q&A section there as well, where you can throw in a question if anything comes up. So, really the idea of this presentation is oftentimes students and families find different schools and colleges that they're interested in, fall in love with the place, and then may realize that they have no clue on how they're going to be able to pay for it. So hopefully this session will help you all think about some things and learn a little bit more about the process, especially if this is your family's first time going through it. Some of this stuff can be a little tricky, and so we're going to unpack everything. So first off, understanding what costs are. We'll also discuss ways that you can pay for those costs. We'll dig in a little bit into the FAFSA, which is the primary application most institutions will require you to submit to apply for aid, and then we'll give you some final takeaways after that. So to start, how much will it cost in understanding the estimates and preparing for your future college home? So when you're thinking about costs during your search, there's a number of things that you should consider. So first off, we always advise students to give yourselves multiple options, right? So, there's private schools that have a certain price tag. Cal Lutheran is an example of that. But you also have excellent public options out there. Here in the state of California, we're talking the UCs, the Cal States, and even community college, and those all have different price tags and opportunities. And then you also want to think about out of state and local. And so that's kind of like the first step, just in general with your college search, but you also want to factor in cost. And now it's just not cost alone that you're going to want to consider, because, again, Cal Lutheran is a great example. Our institution has a pretty hefty price tag. Our tuition alone, the sticker price is almost $50,000 a year. And so that in of itself may scare a number of people off. But once you start getting to our second point and looking into the financial aid options, that's where you'll discover that some of these institutions with a higher sticker price can be a reality for you and your family. So as you've given yourself multiple options, just in general with your search, the public, the private, large, small, in-state, out-of-state, the next step will be to start looking at financial aid websites, search cost of attendance, start looking up scholarships, and then you can start slowly figuring out what this and projecting what these might cost. Because the point is that the published price, or what I've been referring to as sticker price, is rarely what students and families actually pay. Admittedly, that can make this process a little confusing, but just know that it's kind of individualized, and we'll break some of that down. We also recommend that you use online references to help you try to break down some of the realities of cost with different institutions. College Scorecard is a great example of that. So you can go to collegescorecard.ed.gov. That just gives you kind of a breakdown of typical average aid packages. It might even share things like what average loan amount a graduate leaves from different institutions. So that's a great resource for you to look into as you're starting this journey. So let's talk about cost of attendance and what that actually means. So there are two factors that go into what cost of attendance. So the first thing is what we call our direct cost. So that would be tuition, fees, mandatory student fees. That's anything from campus activities. Certain schools charge things for you to be able to take advantage of the health services, counseling, and things like that. So that can go under fees. If you plan to live on campus and on-campus residence halls, there's costs there. And then if you live on campus, typically you have to be on some sort of meal plan. So the direct costs are what you can think of as what are you going to actually be billed by the institution. So again, that's the tuition, student fees, housing fees, and paying for meals. But then you also need to factor in what we call indirect costs. So these are things that you're going to have to pay for as a college student, but you're not going to get a bill from the university for these costs. The most common things that come to mind are books and supplies. So, in college, when you take your courses and there's required textbooks, oftentimes you have to purchase those books yourself. So you need to factor that in. And, I will just throw it out there for certain majors. Some books can be more expensive than others. And a number of institutions do offer some alternative used books, online resources. You'll have to look into that, but you can expect to pay something for books and supplies. But also you're going to want to factor in transportation costs. This is whether you go to a school where you're going to commute if you're not living on campus. So what's it costing you weekly for gas, transportation, that type of thing. Or if you are living on campus, but you're out of state, for example. So if you live here in California and you decide to go to college or university in the Northwest in Washington State, how many times are you flying back and forth home? Are you coming home every summer? Are you coming home every winter break? Are you coming home for spring break? So those are things you want to factor in. And then just other expenses that you have as a college student. So this is going to, again, vary depending on your student situation, depending on where you live, what you like to do. But all of that together equals cost of attendance. Now, the nice thing is many institutions will kind of give you an estimate for what we factor in some of the indirect costs. So when you get, we'll talk about this later on, but when you get a financial aid offer from an institution, oftentimes it'll fill you whatever aid you have, subtract both the direct costs and the estimated indirect costs that typical student spends at our institutions. But that's what we're talking about with cost of attendance. So the way your financial aid is calculated, this goes back to trying to understand the difference between, and I'm going to move my camera a little bit so you can see this next slide. What happens if I do this? So my apologies for this, move out of the way. So when you factor in how your financial aid is calculated, so you have your cost of attendance that we just talked about. Every institution is going to attempt to calculate what's called your financial need. So your cost will be based on financial need, which is the difference between a particular college's cost of attendance and your student aid index. We'll get into what that is exactly in a moment, but student aid index is actually a score that you get once you complete your FAFSA, which we'll talk about in a moment. And colleges will try to meet your financial need. So, again, you'll have your cost of attendance, your direct cost plus your indirect costs. Subtract the student aid index, which again is a score that you get based on your FAFSA results. The thing about the student aid index is that'll vary from student to student. However, your student aid index will remain the same regardless of the institution that you attend. And I'll show you like a more visual representation on how that may play out. And then the result is your financial need. So financial need is what each institution that you're admitted to, that you apply for financial aid for, we will attempt to fill your financial need with a financial aid offer. So the money that you get from each institution. There are some schools that will guarantee to meet 100% of your financial need. Unfortunately, that is a minority of institutions out there. Oh, look at that! I can move my picture there. So you can see the bottom part of the slide here. But majority of us do not guarantee to meet full need. But again, most institutions will try to fill that need. And again, I have like an example of a real world scenario that could play out. So this is how your financial need is calculated. So how can I afford college? So we already talked about things to consider. So certainly you want to start with doing your own research, getting a number of options, finding out what those direct costs are going to be, thinking about indirect costs. Am I going to be out of state? Am I commuting? Am I living on campus? All of that. And then you're going to complete your FAFSA. So that's where we're going to dig into here. So the first thing to understand is when we talk about financial aid and the support and the funds that you're going to get for college, where does this come from? So financial aid is what most people think of. Financial aid can include grants, scholarships, getting an on-campus employment or work study. and federal student loans. And again, we're going to walk through and talk a little bit about the FAFSA and how you can get access to some of this stuff, both through the government, federal, your state, and as well as the institutions you apply for. So your financial need can be met through these. So that's what, again, going back to the previous slide, that's what we're going to attempt to meet with financial aid, your financial need. But then, of course, the other source of funding are your own family's contribution, your income, if you have a job over the summer, if you've worked and saved up, your own income. And then you will also have opportunities to take out private loans, which we'll talk about in a moment. So, think of the bottom three there is what you'll be responsible for after financial aid has been applied to your bill, your direct and indirect costs, and you're going to have to come up with the rest of that funding. Something to note is that, financial aid is just that, it's aid. According to the government, the family is responsible for their children's education. It's not on the institution to fully fund you. Again, most institutions will try to completely fill your financial need, but in some instances, you can expect to have to contribute something, again, whether that's through your family, your own income, private loans. So let's talk about the different types of aid here. So again, we talked about grants, scholarships, work study, federal loans. So the first thing that we have here to talk about are grants. So your eligibility for grants is depending on your financial needs. So you'll need to complete a FAFSA to be considered for that. So grants are essentially what we think of as free money. So this is money that'll be awarded to you that you do not have to pay back upon graduation. So these are good things to get. And but grant is going to be based on financial need. And so the three types of grants that you'll typically be awarded in an aid offer will come from either the federal government. And so that's going to be based on your student aid index and basically income qualifications. So typically, lower income students and families will qualify for some of the federal and state aid. So that includes the Pell Grant. There's also the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or SEOG. So that's what you get for when you apply for the FAFSA. Now, a lot of the states that you all are from also have their own financial aid. So here in California, we have something called the California Grant that's awarded to in-state residents who attend college in-state. And so for these kinds of grants, it's usually how it works. You'll have a state grant that they'll award you for you to attend an in-state college. The amount will be dependent on the type of institution that you attend. So again, for California, for example, the Cal Grant, there's an amount for if you attend a UC, if you attend a Cal State, if you attend a community college, and if you attend a private institution. The Cal Grant for private schools is about $9,700, $9,800 around there. And so to qualify for our state grant, for the California state grant, not only do you have to have your FAFSA complete by March 2nd, you have to meet certain income qualifications, and you also have to meet a GPA qualification. I think the GPA needs to be at least a 3.0 from your 9th through 11th grade, and that's how you could potentially qualify for that. There's also here in the state of California, a DREAM application for DACA and DREAMer students, CADA, which I'll cite again later here in the presentation and note where you can find that if you would qualify for that. So those are two examples of like the federal and state grants. Additionally, though, many institutions also offer their own institutional grants. And so this is something, sometimes we'll have families say that, oh, I know I'm not going to qualify for Pell, or I'm not going to qualify for the Cal grant or whatever state grant, so we're not going to do the FAFSA. And I often caution them against that because institutions also have need-based grants, and we're only able to award that to you if you complete the FAFSA, or some institutions will require something called a CSS profile, which is another application that some institutions, private schools in particular, require. So especially if it's your first time around, I recommend everyone complete the FAFSA, because even though you may not qualify for federal or state aid, you still may be eligible to require, or may be eligible to receive institutional funding based on need, because some of the institutions, such as Cal Lutheran, we do offer need-based grant to middle income families and some upper income as well. So these are grants. So again, grants, free money that is awarded to you typically based on financial need as part of the equation. The other type of free money that everybody likes and everyone typically talks about are scholarships. So scholarships, they function a lot like grants, except they do not have any type of financial need in the process of how they're awarded. And so for most scholarships, for many scholarships, you'll be considered for these even if you do not complete a FAFSA, because again, financial need is not taken into consideration. But every scholarship has its own set of qualifications, and it'll vary on the scholarship, it'll vary on the school. And so on the slide here, we have some different examples of types of scholarships that you might be up for. There are academic scholarships. Sometimes you'll hear those referred to as merit scholarships. These are scholarships that are based on your quantitative academic results, so your grades, your curriculum rigor, if you've taken AP or honors classes, class rank, test scores. And some of these, though, will require you to apply early action or early decisions. So again, for any of these, you're going to want to make sure you check the application deadlines and requirements. Some institutions will offer talent-based scholarships, in particular for the performing and fine arts. Oftentimes, these scholarships will require you to submit some type of portfolio or participate in an audition or do some type of interview. And so you'll see these, for example, California Lutheran offers visual and performing arts scholarships. So if any of you end up applying to Cal Lutheran and you are talented in any of these areas, you'll be notified when that scholarship opens up and what the qualifications for that are. Some institutions have mission-based scholarships. So if there's religious institution or faith-based institution, there may be some opportunities there. Some institutions also give scholarships if they really value leadership or community service as part of their campus community. So again, you just want to look at each of your institution scholarship pages to see what's out there. And then finally, there are athletic scholarships. So if any of you are athletes and you're being considered by institutions that offer athletic scholarships, typically you're going to be recruited for that. So it's not you have to ask them, they'll let you know. We're talking about for this Division I and Division II NCAA institutions. There's also the NAIA schools that'll offer some scholarships. NCAA Division III institutions, which Cal Lutheran happens to be, do not offer athletic scholarships. So just keep that in mind. But the one thing to note about athletic scholarships, even for some of the Division I sports, I think oftentimes people assume that if they're being recruited by a Division I school, that the scholarship opportunity is always going to be a full ride. And you should be aware, particularly for certain sports, full ride scholarships can be very rare. Again, even for some Division I schools. So as you're being recruited and you're talking to the coaches about the different athletic opportunities and scholarships are part of that process, make sure you understand the complete terms and everything that's surrounding that so that you go into the process with eyes wide open. So we have grants and scholarships. Another category, though, are outside scholarships. So these are scholarship opportunities that you would go seek out outside of what a college or university would offer you through financial aid. So these are opportunities that are offered through different organizations and companies. The great thing about outside scholarships is you can take these awards to whatever school that you end up enrolling in, and you can actually start looking now for these opportunities. So if you're a senior getting ready to start the college application and you're looking to start college or university in fall 24, it doesn't hurt to start looking for these opportunities because outside scholarships have all kinds of, so if you thought like the institutional scholarships had a variety of deadlines and criteria, it's like tenfold for the outside scholarships. So you're going to want to start looking at those as soon as possible. We have a couple of websites here that I think are really great. I'll give a plug to our own outside scholarships page at callutheran.edu/outside scholarships. We actually have a listing of a number of scholarship search engines like FastWeb and scholarships.com. But we also on that page have just a number of listings on there of individual scholarships that might be applicable to you in your situation. The other thing that's nice about outside scholarships are a lot of them are for new incoming students, but once you're already in college, a lot of these outside scholarships are for current college students as well. So that's something that you may want to continue looking into all 4 years to see for additional funds. In full transparency, I will note that outside scholarships, there are not a lot of golden ticket full ride outside scholarships. A lot of them are, smaller amounts, 500, 1,000, a couple thousand. A lot of them are only good for 1 year. So just like any scholarship, make sure you really understand the terms that you're getting into and just keep that in mind. You also want to check into like if your family, your parents have different employee benefits. Sometimes companies offer scholarship opportunities for dependents of employees, and so that's another source that you may want to look into. So let's get into the other side. So other source of funding. So again, this involves your family contributions and gifts. So whatever money your family saved up for, any gifts that you get from, graduation from your grandparents, aunts and uncles, so all of that stuff that you want to consider as you're thinking about college costs. Certainly your own income, again, if you worked over the summer or continue to work over the summer, that's something to consider. Something I will mention is that you also have opportunities. Most campuses will offer you some sort of opportunity to work on campus to get a job. Student employment is a great way to have a source of funding for your education, whether you use that money to pay for your bill or your direct costs, or if you're using that just for your own personal expenses during your time as a college student. California Lutheran is a great example. There are some on-campus employment opportunities that you get awarded to you through the FAFSA. That's referred to as work study. So there are some campuses where they're more strict on that, where you have to be a work study qualifier to get a job on campus. But a lot of places and institutions have departments that will fund student employment out of their own budget. And Cal Lutheran, actually, we open up on-campus employment to everyone, even if you don't qualify for federal work study. It's a great opportunity not only to get some extra funds, great professional development opportunity, and I would say that it's probably a little more easier to manage like a full-time college schedule with an on-campus job as opposed to trying to get a job at the mall or at the Apple store, because working on campus, we have a little bit more of an understanding of what your schedule is like and what your life is like as a college student. And so that's just something to keep in mind if you are looking for different opportunities and sources for funding. And I think it also connects you to campus in a different way. We have actually at Cal Lutheran, we found that our students who end up getting jobs on campus do much better with respect to graduation rates and retention. And so we always talk that up. And then finally, another source of funding, if you need it, are private and alternative loans out there. So, if you complete a FAFSA, you'll be offered some kind of federal loan, which loans are money that you get that you will need to pay back upon graduation. So the federal loans are great because there's caps on how much we allow students to take out, but also they have really low interest rates. So they're really, and again, a good source of funding if you need it. But if you want to go outside of that and look at private loans from like a bank or a credit union, the big advice, as institutions for higher ed, we're not allowed to like direct you to specific lenders or anything like that. But just in general, we will tell you to do your research on there, make sure you understand, all the terms, the interest rates, the repayment structure, all of that before you dig into that, because we don't want you to get into any trouble accessing those types of funds. But that is something that many families turn to for their funding as well. All right, so I shared a moment ago that I was going to talk about how financial need may play out in somewhat of a real world situation. And so what I mean by that is, so as I mentioned before, when you complete your FAFSA, and we're going to dig into the FAFSA here in a moment, when you complete that form, you're going to get a score that's called a student aid index. And what this number is a figure that we use in our formula to determine your financial need. So again, going back to one of the earlier slides, we talked about cost of attendance here. So again, cost of attendance is going to be tuition, room and board, indirect costs, book supplies, all of that. Every institution sets their own cost of attendance for their financial aid formula. So I have here 3 examples of how this could play out. So let's say you're applying and you've been admitted to 3 schools. You've been admitted to a 4-year private, a 4-year public, and a community college. And so we've set these prices. 60,000 for the 4-year private. That's roughly what, Cal Lutheran, a place like Cal Lu will cost if you're going to go on campus, housing, meal plan, tuition, about $60,000. The 4-year public we're pulling from like a UC. So if you got their tuition living on campus, it's probably going to be about 35,000. And then the community college, we have it about 5,000, and sometimes the community college might even be a little less than that, but we just set it at 5,000 just for the sake of my simple math here. And so let's say after you've completed your FAFSA, your student aid index is 10,000. So again, as I mentioned before, your student aid index is the same figure at every institution that you're being considered. And so remember, to get your financial need, it's the cost of attendance, subtract your student aid index, and that'll be your financial need. So for the 4-year institution example, your financial need is 50,000. So that's what the school will attempt to give you in financial aid. For the 4-year public, your financial need is 25,000. And then you have no financial need for the community college because 10,000 is greater than 5. So they expect that you'll be able to pay for that completely out of pocket. You don't need any money. So now you have your financial needs. So what does that mean? So you've been admitted to all these places, you know what your need is, and now you get your financial aid offer from all these institutions. All right. So we'll take the community college out of this because again, you have no need and they're not going to give you any aid. But for these 2 institutions here, so you've been admitted to the 4-year and your financial aid offer was $45,000, a lot of money. At the 4-year public school, you were offered $15,000. So what does that mean for your bottom line? That means that, once you subtract your financial aid that you're offered from your financial need, your cost is going to be $15,000. So again, the difference so as you can see, I should mention, in both cases, neither institution filled your need 100%, which, like I said, there will be some schools that are able to fill your need 100%, but unfortunately, that's a small percentage of schools. So there's typically going to be some kind of a gap there. So there's about a $5,000 gap for the private school, and for the public school in this example, there's about $10,000 gap. So when you add the $5,000, $45,000, basically the cost is 45,000 minus the cost up here, the cost of attendance. So that's how I get your final cost here. So you see it costs about $60,000, you get 45, your out of pocket's going to be 15. 35,000 for the public, you got 15,000 in aid, $20,000 is the difference there. So this is one scenario that could happen. In full transparency, it doesn't always happen this way. So there very well could be the case where the school with the higher sticker price, the higher cost of attendance, may be the higher out-of-pocket cost for you. But the whole point is you're not really going to know that until you know what your financial aid offer is from each institution. And so what I typically advise students with respect to this is, consider cost. That should be something that you're aware of. But, at the application phase, really the focus should be on getting admitted to the institution, because after you've been admitted to the institution, the way it works is once you're admitted, you'll get your financial aid offer shortly after that. And then you can really make an informed financial decision once you know what each institution is offering you and what your actual costs are going to be. Because again, as we said in the first slide, the cost of attendance or the published price is rarely what you're going to be paying at the end. So hopefully this all makes sense. And if it's not, I forgot to mention we're recording this session, so you'll be able to go back to this and review. And if you had follow-up questions, you can ask that as well. So now let's go back to the FAFSA. All right, so why apply for the FAFSA and get to know like what we consider to be the most important part of you being qualified and getting financial aid. So FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So this is an application that's offered by the US Department of Ed, and you access this application by going to studentaid.gov. Do not go to FAFSA.com, FAFSA.ed. The website you want is studentaid.gov. It is completely free to complete the FAFSA. Just a word of caution, you should never have to pay to fill out the FAFSA, or sometimes you'll run across a service that says, hey, if you pay us this fee, we'll help streamline the FAFSA for you and complete it for you. It's a complete ripoff, especially now. So something that I'll refer to a couple of times is actually in the fourth point here, the FAFSA is actually going through a refresh and an update. And so, for example, the previous versions of the FAFSA had over 100 questions, and now it's simplified to under 40 questions. So again, it does take a little time to complete, but it's nothing that most people can't handle. Do not pay. If someone's trying to charge you to help you fill out the FAFSA, just turn the other way. They don't love you, trust me. So complete that. And as I mentioned before, the results of your FAFSA after you've completed everything, and we'll talk about a little bit what's included in the FAFSA, it'll generate what's called a student aid index. And again, that's that score that we use in our formula to determine your financial need, which will ultimately determine what kind of aid package you get from each institution. So when it comes to the FAFSA, we always recommend that you try to get started on this as early as possible. This year, the earliest the FAFSA will be ready. So normally the FAFSA is ready in October of your senior year is when you can start completing it. But because they're updating it, it's not going to be ready in October this year. They said that the government will, by law, it has to be ready by January 1, but it could be ready, they're saying, anytime between December and January 1. Trust me, whatever mailing list or contact list you're on for whatever colleges you're considering, as soon as the FAFSA is available, you'll be notified what that is. But you can expect at the latest to start working on it on January 1st. And as I mentioned before, especially if you want to be considered for some of the state aid, most states have a deadline in early March. So California, to be considered, for example, for the Cal Grant, you need to submit have your FAFSA submitted and complete by March 2nd. And I will say at some institutions, some financial aid is first come, first served. And so that's another reason why I don't recommend you sitting on this. As soon as you have the opportunity to complete it, make sure you get that done and not wait too long to get that complete. So what do you need to complete the FAFSA? Probably one of the most important things is parent support. You'll need to fill this out together. So when it comes to applying for college, a lot of institutions will tell students and families that we really want the students to have ownership over the process. And a lot of families and a lot of parents, I talk to them, they're really proud to let us know that, hey, I'm letting my son or daughter really own this process. We're really hands off. We're letting them lead it. And that's great. But when it comes to completing the FAFSA and financial aid, the student cannot do that on their own. Because as we'll dig into this, we do require parent data as part of the process. So when you're completing your FAFSA, you have to complete something called a Federal Student Aid ID to log in and complete and sign the FAFSA. Everyone in your family who's going to be on the form will be responsible for having their own FSA ID. So if you're in a two-parent household, both parents are going to need to complete their own ID and their own login to sign. If you're in a single parent situation or divorce, depending on that, you may only need the one. But this is something that both the students and the parents will have to sign. I can't tell you how many times we have students who start the process and they submit their FAFSA and they say, yeah, I've submitted everything, and don't realize that, and they may even have their parent information on there, but their parent didn't sign it. So that holds things up. So make sure, just already know that everyone who's involved, who's contributing to students' education will need to participate and fill this out. So parent, you need to be involved in this. For divorced or single parent household, the way that works, we get this asked a lot, the parent who provides the most financial support is the one who's required to complete the FAFSA. This will be a change. So for those of you who've done this before, the old rule was it was based on who the student's primary residence was with. That is no longer the case. So again, it's supposed to be the parent who provides the most financial support is the one who's required to complete the FAFSA. Again, if you are in a divorce situation, then if it's a 50-50 split, then both parents should be submitting the form. So what else is included on there, or what's included on here? So family income information. So what's put on the FAFSA is tax information from 2 years prior. You'll hear the term a lot called prior. So for example, for students who are starting college next fall, for fall 24, the tax return that's going to be used to determine your aid eligibility will be from 2022. With the updated FAFSA now, the IRS data will automatically transfer to your FAFSA. Of course, you have to give them permission for the automatic transfer. So if you've completed your taxes and your tax return, you just do the automatic data retrieval, and that'll automatically upload all of your information onto the FAFSA. It makes it a lot more easier to complete the form without you having to submit documents. Back in the day when I had to apply, we'd have to get documents and paper copies and things like that. Now it's really all done online, and so it's done for ease, and it's a lot more efficient that way. And then, like in terms of what you can expect to put on the FAFSA, it's just primarily your income, and so reportable income and assets. There are certain things that you'll have to, like how much funds you have in the bank, and there are a couple other assets that you'll have to put down there, but it'll primarily be driven by your income. You will also need to include your social security number and driver's license if you have one. So that's something to just be prepared to include on your FAFSA, students and parents. And then on the FAFSA, you will be able to list up to 10 schools that you're applying to on your FAFSA. So you'll get a code for each university that you're applying to. You'll see down here that Cal Lutheran's FAFSA code is 001133. So you put that on there. And then once you submit and complete your FAFSA, that's how the information gets sent to us, by putting our code on there. And I'll talk a little bit about, if you happen to be applying to more than 10 schools, how you can get that on there. So what if you don't have a social security number? So students without a social security number, or who are not an eligible non-citizen, can still qualify for institutional financial aid. So you won't qualify for, so if you don't have a social security number and not an eligible non-citizen, you won't be able to complete the FAFSA to be considered for federal aids like the Pell Grant, SEOG, but most institutions will still consider those students for institutional aid. So the advice here is to follow up with each school to verify what additional application forms or documents are required to be considered for institutional funds. So not just the scholarships, but the need-based grant. And then in California, if you happen to be in this situation, there is an application, the California Dream Act application, the CADA, that you are able to access. You go to the website there, dream.csac.ca.gov. And basically, the CADA is a form that mirrors the FAFSA. So it asks the same type of demographic and financial questions. This will make you eligible for the Cal Grant, and it also gives the institutions that you're applying to in California a student aid index, so we can determine how much institutional aid you might qualify for us. So, but again, if you're in this situation, just follow up with the institutions to make sure you know what forms they need to fully consider you for financial aid. The other thing that we want to discuss briefly are special circumstances. So certainly, especially with the last couple of years with the pandemic, there are a number of things that may not show up on paper, may not show up on your earnings, or your earnings 2 years ago may not be your reality for today. So there's a number of areas that could have impacted your ability and your family's ability to pay for college. And so if you have a documented loss of income, change of employment status, high medical expenses that went beyond whatever your insurance would pay, a recent death in the family, or if you can't obtain parent information, follow up with the institutions that you're applying for and learn about what their special circumstances processes are. Different schools are going to handle this differently. I wish I could tell you there's like one universal way for you to report whatever special circumstance you have, but every institution is going to treat it a little bit different. So, you know, be don't be afraid, and you have to be, you know, if you have a special circumstance, you have to be really forward with the financial aid offices to find out, you know, what you need to submit. A lot of places will require some kind of documentation or a written explanation. So make sure that you really, you know, follow up with that. And you know, just like we said, you know, everyone should really be completing the FAFSA, especially if it's your first time around. If you have a special circumstance, you should still move forward in trying to complete the FAFSA, because actually some places, some institutions will not let you go through a special circumstances process if there's no FAFSA on file. So even this kind of a process, it's going to start with the FAFSA. So expect that you're going to have to complete that. Try to get that done as much as you can. If you hit a roadblock, contact the financial aid office, and most offices will walk you through that. At least we do here at Cal. Our financial aid office is awesome. They're very friendly. So just a few reminders about the FAFSA. I hopefully didn't go through that too quick, but just things to remember: fill it out as soon as possible. Don't sit on it. I'm going to skip ahead to the final point there. You'll be reapplying every year. So if you end up completing the FAFSA and you end up receiving need-based aid, especially if you get any federal or state financial aid, you're going to have to submit the FAFSA every year. So our biggest piece of advice is do not sit on it. Do not wait until, you know, late in the summer to complete it. I always advise students and families to really get on this as soon as the FAFSA becomes available. As I mentioned before, in normal years, FAFSA is ready in October. This year, it'll be January. We're hoping for the next academic year, it'll be back to that October. Don't sit on it. One of the reasons why they based the FAFSA on 2 years prior tax information is the idea that you should already have your taxes filled out. So even if you're a late tax filer, hopefully you already have your taxes from 2 years ago complete. So there should be no delay as far as that. Get that done as soon as possible. And again, especially for those of you who are applying for school next year, there are some institutions that do run out of certain funds. Some things are on a first come, first served basis. So to make sure that you're fully considered for all of the aid opportunities that you're going to be qualified for, complete as soon as possible. Add your top 10 colleges that you're applying to. So I mentioned before that there is a way for you to add more than 10 colleges on your FAFSA. So once you complete the FAFSA, you list your 10 schools and you submit it, you can find out from each of those 10 schools if they received your data. So if a school has already received your FAFSA data, you will be able to go back into your FAFSA and remove their code. So once you remove the code, that gives you room to put another college or university on there. Once an institution has your information, it doesn't matter if they're still on your FAFSA or not. We already have your information. So that's how you can get more than 10 schools on there. So you put the 10 on there, submit the form, follow up with those institutions, make sure they have your information. Do you have my student aid information? Do you have my FAFSA? If they say yes, you can then go back into your FAFSA and remove that school and add another one if you're applying to more than 10. So hopefully that makes sense. For Cal Grant eligibility, again, and you can kind of fill in the blank for any of your other state schools I've worked at. For example, in Oregon State, they have a grant that's similar, but specifically for those of you in California, you need to make sure that there's a California school on your FAFSA to be checked for Cal Grant eligibility. So in your top 10, make sure there is an in-state institution on there to see if you're eligible for Cal Grant, because again, Cal Grant eligibility is determined, there's a GPA requirement, but there's also financial ceilings there. And then I already mentioned you'll be reapplying every single year. So that's just something to keep in mind with the FAFSA. So I have a few more slides here, just some additional takeaways for you to keep in mind as you're going through this, and then I'll have a few minutes for questions. I actually see that there's a couple in there already. So couple of reminders here. I mentioned already a couple of times that for this year, January 1 is going to be the date where the FAFSA is available at studentaid.gov. There's a slight possibility that it may be available a little earlier than that, but we're not holding our breath. So just expect by January 1 that you'll be able to complete the FAFSA. And for those of you who are CADA eligible, you'll be able to look at that. March 2nd is the deadline for Cal Grant verification. So I can't express that enough. If you think you might be eligible for the California grant and you don't apply for, or you don't complete your FAFSA before March, on or before March 2nd, you're going to miss out on that opportunity. That is a hard, non-negotiable. No matter how nice you ask for us to make an exception for you, it's not going to work. So make sure you get that FAFSA in before March 2nd. Other upcoming dates to remember is keep in mind, Common Applications already open at commonapp.org. That's the application that we use here at California Lutheran for new first-year applications. And so if you want to get a jump start on your application, you can start working on that now. We're not going to we won't review applications probably before November, and we don't start notifying students until mid-December. But if you have the time to work on your application now, or be able to stretch it out a bit, just know that that's open and you can start working on your application, and you don't have to wait until the final hour to get that in. And then just a brief reminder for those of you who are already high on your list, early action deadline for Cal Lutheran is November 15th. Early action students can get full consideration for basically every type of scholarship that we offer here. If you end up applying regular decision with us, you'll still qualify and be considered for most of our scholarships, but if financial aid is going to be a big determining factor for you to attend Cal Lutheran or not, I would recommend that you try to get an application in early. In early action, this is not an application workshop, but just as a reminder, early action is an early application program and deadline where you'll get your decision sooner, but you'll still have until May 1st to decide whether or not you want to accept our offer. It's not a binding agreement, so you'll just get your decision from us sooner. And then finally, important takeaways. So just to reiterate, don't rule out a college or university just based on the published price or the sticker price. As we saw in the examples and as I tried to articulate today, while some schools may have a bigger published price than others or higher price than others, that does not always translate into what you may pay out of pocket. What's really going to determine is what your family's eligibility is for aid, what your financial need, and then what you qualify in terms of not only the need-based aid that you get, but if you do happen to earn a really healthy academic scholarship or a really high athletic scholarship or talent scholarship. So, as I said, during the application process, the main focus should really be about getting into the colleges and universities that you're applying to. Certainly have price in the back of your mind, and you should have some options where you think about, if I don't get a dime from them, we'll still be able to make this work. So for some families, that's only going to be community college. For some, that may be the state schools. And for some, it may even be the private schools. But have some options that are safe in terms of, I know I'll get in, I know we'll be able to afford this. And then it's okay to have some reach schools, both in terms of like, if I'm going to get in or not. And, hey, if we get in, it's going to have to work out a certain way. Like we're going to have to get a certain amount of aid for us to be able to make this happen. So, but you can make that decision after you know what you've qualified for and what aid package you've been offered. Find the colleges that you're most interested in attending first and apply and see what your aid package is. That's basically what I said. Many private institutions have grants to help meet financial needs. So this again is circling back to my point that even if you already know, because many families, you probably know whether or not if you're going to qualify for Pell Grant or any of the federal aid that's offered to lower income students and families. But what is not always apparent is, different institutions offer need-based aid for families across the economic spectrum. So many middle income and upper middle income families do qualify for need-based financial aid at different private institutions. And so again, the only way you're going to know that is if you complete a FAFSA and see what you get. So again, that's to the final point. Middle and upper income families who don't qualify for federal state aid can still qualify for institutional funds. And then also, again, a reminder, apply for outside scholarships all throughout your senior year of high school and each year of college. Because as I mentioned before, some of those outside scholarships are for new students, but a lot of them are also for current students. And there's all kinds of different criteria. If you're this kind of a major, if you participate in this activity, there's tons of them out there. So make sure you keep that opened up. And so with that, I'm going to take some questions. So, okay, so I see one question talking about the one of the direct links on our website didn't work. Jackson, feel free to email us at admission at callutheran.edu, and we'll look into that. So I see one question: will the existing 100+ question FAFSA be available October 1 like normal for those trying to apply for early admission and need the info soon? So no, that's a great question. So unfortunately, this is the last year that the existing FAFSA is available. So it's going to be kind of a tricky year for students who are applying to early admission because again, the FAFSA is not going to be available until again, between December and January 1. A lot of institutions are already talking about how this is going to impact how they handle their early application pools. So what happens at most places, they'll be able to tell you what your institutional aid would be. So if you qualify for scholarships, you'll be able to know that. But any need-based aid is going to have to wait until after the FAFSA is done. There are some institutions, California Lutheran is not one of them. I mentioned before, there's a form called the CSS profile. So if you happen to be applying to one of those kinds of institutions that require that form, they may be able to provide you a better idea or a pretty close idea of what you might qualify for in terms of need-based aid. But we're kind of, every institution is kind of going to be in a wait and see mode in terms of how they're going to handle the early applications. What I'm hearing from a lot of places, and Cal Lutheran is going to be no different, we expect our initial need packages, need full aid offers to go out by like the middle to the end of January. And so that will that's when we'll get some of those aid packages out. So the nice thing about an institution like Cal Lutheran, as I mentioned before, even though we have an early admission deadline and you get your decision from us sooner, it's not a binding agreement. And you have until May 1 to decide. So if you're applying to Cal Lutheran or any school that's early action, you don't need to make your decision. You'll have time to wait until you get your full financial aid package before you have to commit. Now, if you're applying to an early decision school, that's something that you may want to discuss with your family or with the institution to figure out how you may want to handle that, because again, those are binding agreements. And so if you know that your financial aid eligibility is going to really determine whether or not you can go there, you may want to decide whether or not applying early decision is the right move for you. Or if you're confident that you're going to get what you need, you can move forward with that and see how that institution may handle if they don't end up giving you the aid that you need. So it's going to be kind of a tough situation this year because of it. But again, unfortunately, Cal Lutheran or any of our institutions, we can't control how fast or slow the government is in getting the FAFSA done. So another question: how long after the deadline do you find out how much FAFSA money you will get? So again, so the way the cadence typically works with FAFSA and all that, so you apply to the institution, If you are admitted, you'll get your admit notice. And at some institutions, I'll use Cal Lutheran as an example, we'll let you know. So at Cal Lutheran, every student who is admitted is automatically considered for what we call an admission scholarship. That's primarily based on your academics. We do take some other factors in consideration, but it's primarily an academic scholarship. You'll be notified what that scholarship is upon admission. And then depending on when you apply. So like I said, I don't have the exact date now, but say for example, you apply early action, we'll get a decision to you by mid-January. We do release some decisions in early December. Our initial need aid packages will probably be ready like late January, early February. So that's what it is. If you end up applying regular decision with us, it usually takes us, so regular decision, we start notifying students on or before April 1. Usually you'll get a aid package, a full aid offer from us about a week or so after you've been notified of your admission decision. And again, in any case, you have until May 1 to decide whether or not you want to accept our offer of admission with financial aid works out like that. So yeah, so that's kind of how that works. Hopefully that answers your question. I don't see any other questions on the docket. I'll hang back for a moment to see if anyone else has any other questions, but hopefully this is helpful. Again, as I mentioned, this is recorded, so if any of the information or if any of the slides, you didn't get a chance to take a note, you'll be able to go back to that. I believe we'll email you the link to the presentation so you can refer back. But otherwise, like I said, we got a couple more minutes. I'll hang back, but if you need to jump off now, thank you for joining us. We look forward to working with you this fall for both your admission and your financial aid needs. There's my contact info if you need to follow up with me. If there's a question that you want to ask me more directly, you don't want me to answer on the broadcast here, I'll take that.